It's a, yeah, can you hear me? Yeah, now I can hear me. Sorry to be starting a little late. Today is Tuesday, July 23rd at 9:10 on that clock. And I'm calling this meeting to order. I'm going to begin by introducing our board members and our staff. With me today are my fellow colleagues. To my left is Vice Chair Frances Spivey Weber, and to her left is Board Member Dee Dee Diadamo, and to my right is Board Member Stephen Moore. Mr. Howard, please introduce your staff.
Yes, thank you. To my right, Chief Deputies John Bishop and Karen Turgovich. To my left, Chief Counsel Michael Laufer, and assisting the board today are Janine Townsend and Courtney Davis.
Thank you. Now, to remind you all of the emergency evacuation procedures, I see a lot of veterans, but for those of you who aren't, take a minute to find the nearest emergency exit, and when you hear an emergency sounding like sound, which you will hear if there is an emergency, just carefully take your stuff, go out, and go to Cesar Chavez Park out in the middle or anywhere else you want to know. If you stay in the park, you'll get a message that you're coming when it's time to come back, so pretty much up to you. But thank you very much. And this meeting is being webcast and recorded, so please speak into the microphone when you come up. Do not follow my model, because that's hard for me to do, but you have to get very close to the microphone in order for it to work. So just a reminder. And please also remember to put all of your electronics on silent as I am demonstrating at this moment, because I didn't do it in advance. No, I did. I never turned it back on yesterday. Okay. Our first item of business is a Superior Accomplishment Award, which is terrific. We always like those. So take it away, Eric and Barbara.
Hello everyone, welcome. I'm Barbara Anderson. I'm the training administrator. I work in the training academy and the training office here at the Water Board. And I'm here to talk about Terry Owens this morning. Terry's receiving this award for her outstanding contribution towards getting the new training office up and running. I'm going to read this. My memorization skills aren't what they used to be. Due to some new requirements from the state controllers, the Water Board's created a new training office. A new AGPA position was allocated and filled for this purpose. Unfortunately, the newly hired AGPA only stayed in the position for 3 months. This left us in the middle of finalizing new procedures, processing a large backlog of training requests, and in the hiring process for the new AGPA. At the beginning of 2013, progress in the training office was at a standstill. That's when Terry Owens agreed to step into the void left by the AGPA vacancy, and boy did she ever. In addition to her already challenging duties, providing administrative support for both the Office of Enforcement and ORPP, she took on and met the extreme challenge presented by the developing training office. Between January and May of 2013, Terry wrote 13 training contracts and processed 325 training requests, managing to completely process the existing backlog. She finalized the revised training request form and the in-state travel and training and conference attendance form. She assisted with finessing the training office procedures, sat on the interview panel, and assisted with selecting the new AGPA, which, by the way, has turned out to be an awesome hire. Terry trained the new AGPA as well. In this time, we found an opportunity to reassign the Office of Enforcement Administrative Support, which sounds like a blessing, with all the work required during this time. However, that meant that Terry also needed to provide guidance for her replacement, which would require added effort. During this time, Terry developed a rapport with all the administrative officers and training liaisons who were disappointed when they found out that our new hire would take over processing their training requests. They had come to trust that Terry would meet their needs and accommodate even those extremely short-notice training requests. Terry voluntarily gave up her telework day and delayed her vacation plans to be sure she was available. Even more impressive is that Terry accomplished all of this during normal work hours without any overtime. Without Terry Owens taking on and meeting the challenge, the training office would have been unable to meet training contracting requirements or process training requests for much of 2012 and 2013, and the Water Board's ability to meet mandated training requirements and process job-required training requests would have been seriously compromised. Staff would not have obtained the training needed to fulfill their job requirements. So Terry, I want to thank you so much for agreeing to take on this challenge and executing it so well. And just basically, you know, thanks for saving our bacon.
I'll just briefly add, Terry, no matter what challenge we throw at you, you find a solution. No matter how much work we pile on, you always find a way to get it done. Yet at the same time, you consistently show the fortitude to push back when something doesn't seem right or you think there's a better way to do things. I think, Terry, some people might call that attitude. I'll call it fortitude. And it's really what's, I think, helped you to be successful and really be able to accomplish all that you've done. I mean, 13 contracts in less than 6 months, 300+ training requests. That's absolutely phenomenal. Thank you so much. I feel so fortunate that we have you here. And your hard work, your dedication, it hasn't gone unnoticed. We've got for you today the Superior Accomplishment Award plaque that we want to present, as well as a check for $250. Thank you so much. Congratulations. Appreciate your work so much.
Thank you.
Oh, we come up here. We do it. Up here. Do a photo.
Thank you so much for bringing that. It's always great. All right, we're now into the public forum portion of the meeting, and the board can hear from any person wishing to speak about any matter not pending before the board. And we do have a speaker this morning, Sarah Amanzadeh, the Executive Director of the California Coastkeeper Alliance. Hi, Sarah. Sorry, I don't have my bifocal, so it's like readers.
Good morning, board members. Sarah Amanzadeh, Executive Director of the California Coastkeeper Alliance. I just want to make a request today. There's a letter forthcoming from a very large coalition of tribal and environmental justice organizations regarding your designation of 2 additional beneficial uses. I just wanted to flag it for you and put it on your radar, let you know that it's something that a very large coalition of groups is engaged around, including some of our member organizations, Ventura Coastkeeper, Klamath River Keeper, San Francisco Bay Keeper. We ask that you designate 2 additional beneficial uses, subsistence fishing and tribal cultural uses. In doing so, the board would be following a precedent established by the North Coast Regional Water Board and would address impaired waterways to protect those that are most vulnerable to toxic exposures to tribal communities, low-income communities, and communities of color. Currently, many remediation plans establish cleanup goals that do not reflect the true beneficial uses of watersheds, nor do they protect all the members of the population from the effects of water pollution. So we just encourage the board to act quickly when you receive this request, to recognize these additional beneficial uses. Clean Water Action and the California Indian Environmental Alliance have been working hard on this and will be submitting additional information shortly.
Terrific. Thank you very much, Sarah.
Thank you.
You may know we already do have a study commissioned with UC Berkeley. Professor, is it Fraser? Something like, it starts with an F, to look at tribal subsistence issues. And
Yes.
we're already looking at this issue and considering it. So we'll look forward to seeing what it is that the materials will be great.
Thank you.
Do you remember his, Jonathan?
So I think it's with UC Davis, and
UC
we're
Davis.
looking at incorporating this into our Mercury work
Right.
at the same time. So.
Good. Great. Thank you. All right. Time to consider the minutes from the June 18th to 19th board meeting. Anyone have a motion?
I move we accept the minutes.
All right, everyone okay with that? All right.
Aye.
Terrific.
Aye.
The minutes are approved. Do any of my colleagues have any reports to make?
I have two, very briefly. In early July, the Los Angeles Regional Board and its TMDL staff and US EPA celebrated the end of and you'll remember this, the 14-year consent decree that guided their work on approximately 195 water body pollutant combinations.
Who signed that consent decree?
Let me make a stab at that. And also in sort of the long term, finally coming to an end, but to a very positive end. In San Diego, the board ended over 12 years of litigation against the U.S. International Boundary and Water Commission International Wastewater Treatment Plant because of, and the reason for ending the litigation is that there had been remarkable water quality improvements and upgrades in that plant, and the water board was complimented, the regional board was complimented by the judge in this case for coming forward with this case about 12 years ago, and for all the improvements that have been made both in Mexico as well as in the U.S. So but that's another one you know about.
Thank you, Chair Marcus. So for my board report, just let you know about, let's see, last month I talked about Region 1 more, so I'll talk about Region 3, especially since we have folks from the region in the room. On June 21st, I attended a ceremonial groundbreaking for the San Clemente Dam removal and Carmel River reroute project. Board members had taken a tour of that site. I didn't attend that one, but it was a good opportunity to participate in what are basically 2 days that are positive in a construction project. There's the groundbreaking and the ribbon cutting, so I got to be part of the groundbreaking. We had folks there such as our Secretary for Natural Resources, John Laird. We had folks from the Cal American Water Company. Representative Sam Farr gave a speech, and the member of the State Senate, Bill Monning, and Public Utilities Commissioner Catherine Sandoval, whom I shared a tour of the site with and met with Chief Counsel. So it was a good opportunity to be with these folks and celebrate this major dam removal river reroute project. Also of note were State Coastal Conservancy and NOAA Fisheries, who played a leadership role. But probably one of the highlights was the 3 middle school students, Chloe Berry Smith, Sierra Brinton, and Dania Novak of the International School Monterey, who were very eloquent in trying to get our disparate agencies to have a common holistic mission about water in all of our empowering missions, whether you're a company or an agency. This is what folks that are 10, 11, 12 years old expect us to do, and it was very moving and eloquent. So I thought that was the highlight of the program. I was a luncheon speaker with Deputy Administrator Alexis Strauss at the U.S. Conference of Mayors Water Council on July 11th, and it was a real honor to be there and to speak about integrated water management, but also to kind of link with a national dialogue and discussion that's driven a lot by the combined sewer systems, the large cities around the country. We have 2 in the state of California, San Francisco and parts of Sacramento that we're in right now. But it's interesting, the issues of integrating wastewater, stormwater, flood control, and water supply are a national dialogue, and we have a lot to offer that dialogue in our state. Although we may have different drivers, but certainly these issues, EPA, as Alexis Strauss, who was sharing the podium with me, emphasized their new integrated planning framework, which endeavors to combine these issues. So I think, we're a part of a general momentum on that discussion. And then finally, I joined 3 regional board members on July 12th on a tour that was hosted by the Pajaro Valley Water Management Agency, and we had a chance to visit their facilities as well as some groundwater recharge facilities. And I wanted to let folks know that I had been out in the region. We didn't discuss the petition at all or any of the pending items on the agenda today, but it was a good opportunity to learn about some farm practices and how the Pajaro Valley community is gathered around a community water dialogue, which appears to be very fruitful, as it were, in terms of really combining different interests and integrating everyone's interests in trying to manage that challenging area. You know, seawater intrusion has been an issue that the state board has been concerned with for decades, and it's good to see folks in the area coming together to really take on that challenge. So with that, thank you for the opportunity to give a report today.
Thanks a lot, Steve.
Yes, on Friday I attended Santa Ana Regional Board, and I think that the most remarkable thing is that they adopted a nutrient management plan. The previous month they focused on livestock, dairies, and I wasn't able to attend that meeting, but apparently something similar occurred at both meetings, and that is that there was no opposition to the plan. And so I just wanted to comment, although I know it's no surprise to any of you, that at Santa Ana they really have an amazing ability to work collaboratively across all stakeholder groups. And so I look forward to gleaning how exactly they've been able to do that through the years. Mostly it was just an informational item, as it turned out. It was adopted with no opposition. And I also used it as an opportunity to get to know some of their board members afterwards. Less than a quorum, a few of us sat down, and they were explaining to me sort of the history of their collaboration. And I'll probably be going down next month to go on a couple of tours.
Fantastic.
So, thanks.
Thank you. Thank you for, we'll tell Tam that you all did this. And wherever she is. Right, exactly. Thank you very much. Before we move on to the items on the agenda, I just want to give a heads up. I know there'll be people coming in for a variety of items over time, and I wanted to give you a heads up on how we plan to run the meeting. It is, I think, there's not a pool. No money is at stake, not even food or anything. But I think it's going to be a long day. And we have a number of items on the agenda where it's hard to know how long they are actually going to take. Some we can estimate. But as some of you know, in the interest of making, creating a situation where people don't have to stay overnight, we're going to try and get through it all today. That's how we've calendared it. So we will, however, take some breaks, because sometimes I know I've not done any breaks. So let me just give you a sense of how we'll be doing it to try and expedite the morning, and maybe I'm wrong, and it won't take as long. But we'll take one 15-minute break at some point in the morning, probably sometime between 10:30 and 11, and then at a certain point we'll take a very short lunch break, so we're giving people a chance to run and grab food nearby. If your item's not up, maybe you want to go get whatever you might have, so you don't, if it's further afield is your preference. But we'll take a half hour somewhere in there, and I'm going to judge it based on where we are in the agenda, and then we probably will take another 15-minute break at some point in the afternoon. I know that's not an earth-shaking announcement, but I just wanted to give you all a little time to be able to plan your individual days accordingly. So that's how we're gonna go today. So with that, let's move on to item 3, consideration of a proposed resolution adopting Clean Water State Revolving Fund Program preliminary funding commitment for the city of Stockton.
Chair Marcus, I don't know if you want to try to take the consent items 3 and 4 together, unless you have a blue card that's pulled one off.
I do not have any cards, so go ahead. Let's, does anyone want to at least say what they are, even if it's? Right, so I'll say what it is. I'm just going to let you say what it is. I can say what it is. Item number 4 is consideration of a proposed resolution approving the 2014 Clean Water Act 319H non-point source program preferences, authorizing staff to solicit and recommend projects, and authorizing the executive director or designee to award and execute finance agreements for the 2014 Federal Clean Water Act 319H non-point source grant program. I have no cards.
I move adoption of the 2 consent items as read.
I second the motion, and just, you know, once again, it's amazing the breadth of projects and the regional boards are working on, and especially in item 4. I just want to commend everyone's hard work around the state on this impressive list of projects that really link our regulatory and clean water goals together. So I have second.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. Great. Those are approved. Terrific. Mr. Howard, item 5.
Thank you. Item 5 is an information item. The board several years ago adopted the once through cooling water policy, and in that policy it requires an annual report from what we call the SWRCB, the Statewide Advisory Committee on Cooling Water Intake Structures. The report from SWRCB was completed in April 2013, and Robert Oglesby is a member of the SWRCB team, is here to do the presentation.
Good morning,
Good morning.
Madam Chair, board members, and good to see some of the new faces on the board as well. So thank you for giving me the opportunity to present the report on the SWRCB recommendation. This is an annual tradition where we give an update to the board on the progress being made on once through cooling. Before I proceed, though, I wanted to recognize and thank Mike Jaskey of the Energy Commission staff, who's really done a lot of the heavy lifting in the technical work group. Certainly has helped me a great deal on the subject matter and in preparation for the meetings for these. I noticed that Dennis Peters is also here from Cal ISO, and I'm probably missing some other folks who also have done a great deal of work, so my apologies to those, but I wanted to acknowledge their hard work on that. I also wanted to thank Fran Spivey Weber for participating in an infrastructure workshop last week in Southern California that deals with many of the issues that fall out of the evolving circumstances relating particularly to San Onofre's nuclear facility coming offline, and an assessment of the infrastructure needs. So I want to really appreciate her dedicating her time and joining the panel, which was a joint proceeding by the Public Utilities Commission and the Energy Commission. So I have a substantial presentation, and I want to respect your time. I'll try to move through it efficiently, but there's some new and important developments that occurred over this past year that are going to require a little bit of extra time to discuss. First, the SWRCB, which rolls right off the tongue, committee.
Is that the correct pronunciation?
Well, SWRCB, tomato, tomato.
Okay. I just want to get it right.
But again, it's the Statewide Advisory Committee on Cooling Water Intake Structures, but I'll call it SWRCB. So we've reviewed the review of the adopted once through cooling facility compliance states for infrastructure realities is what we do every year. Cal ISO and state agencies that are participating on that. Oh, do I have a slide clicker? Thank you. Roll the wheel.
Let's
Okay,
see how you do. This is a test too. It's the mouse and the. Very good.
Okay. Thanks. It's nice to be kind of self-directed here. So Cal ISO and the other state agencies are looking at the once through cooling facility retirements on a rolling 10-year horizon. And Cal ISO has completed studies for the San Diego and Los Angeles areas, which conclude that there are major problems in the San Diego and Orange County regions with songs being offline. I'll get into those in more detail, but I also want to qualify the term major problems because we're able to keep the lights on. We're dealing with a lot of adjustments I'll go into to make sure there's a steady supply, but it does have a bearing on how we do energy planning going forward and a potential bearing on the schedule of phase out for once through cooling facilities. Whoops. So this is a map of the once-through cooling facilities in the state of California. And the major message that I would like you to observe in this slide is that the brown areas are the local reliability areas. And so as we do the assessments for what's needed as we phase out once-through cooling and phase in replacement facilities or other strategies like imports, it's important to note that there are strong regional considerations. It's not just a statewide net versus net. And that's particularly evident now that we're in a post-songs world. So let me move to that really quick, since it's the biggest single change, and it's probably the biggest challenge that's going to face the schedule of the once-through cooling phase out as we go forward in the next year or two. Now, both units had been off online because of some leaks in a steam tube generator for about 18 months or so now. And recently, Southern California Edison announced that they're going to permanently retire the facility. That's a significant energy source in that region, in the southern Los Angeles basin, San Diego, Orange County region. And it's significant not only because of the gross generating capacity that it has, which is substantial at 23,000 megawatts, but because of the voltage support it provides in the grid. Reactive power. It has inertia that allows the grid to both operate more efficiently, deal with fluctuations in the power grid, and also enables more importation of electricity generation from outside sources. So it's got a number of factors. It's not just a watt for a watt equation that we need to look at, plus we need to look at those local service areas. I'm lagging behind. As I mentioned, San Diego, Orange County are more affected than the Los Angeles basin, and in 2013 the CPUC plans to look at both additional local capacity requirements and the overall impacts of SONG's retirement. So over the past 18 months, because this major power plant was offline, we had to do a number of significant near-term measures to try and make sure that we had both the generation and the voltage support in the air to keep the lights on. There's been a great deal of effort and coordination between the three agencies, principal energy agencies, to work together to address all of these issues, and that's the CPUC, CAISO, and the Energy Commission. There have been transmission line improvements. That's the first bullet referring to Barry Ellis, which provides some additional flexibility and capacity for importing electricity. The second bullet refers to the Huntington Beach Units 3 and 4, converting them into synchronous condensers, and that just began operation. That provides that voltage support I was talking about. It's actually using electricity to turn generators to provide the voltage support. That's how important that is. I'll mention really briefly that these Huntington Beach units were old shut-down power plants, which we restarted to get it through last summer. And then in order to transfer air quality permits to other new facilities, they've been converted to the synchronous generators which have no emissions. They're, as I said, electrical powered motors that support the grid. A number of capacitors have been installed in the area. Those, again, are for grid support and are part of the components that will ensure reliability in light of fluctuations that happen on the grid as people turn things on and off. And we have some new resources that primarily benefit the Los Angeles basin. That's the south of Lugo reference, which power folks know where that is, but no one else does. But we've got El Segundo repowering, we've got the Sentinel up and going, and Walnut Creek. So there's new energy resources which will help support the grid. They're not as useful as you go farther south. The CPUC also authorized fully funding of Flex Alerts, which has been a significant help in reducing the demand on the system up to 1,000 megawatts through voluntary participation. The catch is you have to have some lead time. It's not something that can react to, say, a power plant going down or a fire taking a transmission line down that could be activated in say, 30 minutes, which would be what we really would like to see. but it is good for load shedding when you know there's going to be a heat wave and everyone can participate. It does wear off over time, you know, when you have extended heat waves. So we're really looking at trying to develop more demand response alternatives that'll help shave peaks during you know, high demand periods. And the CalISO has been working hard to make sure that the existing generation, much of which is very, very old, is well maintained, and that the maintenance cycles are occurring at a time of low demand so that we can have them running and available now during high demand. And a last point that I'll add that's not on the slide is the Sunrise Power Link, which is a major transmission line importing in the South San Diego area east to west, is open and operational. That's been a tremendous help for San Diego. That line was originally created to have some capacity for growth, but because of the Songs outage, it's kind of gotten full up right away. So it's good that it's there. The transmission lines are tremendously challenging to site and bring online, and that's available to us now just in time. In response to the announcement of the full retirement of San Onofre, the governor called for a task force that tasked the state agencies to work together to come up with recommendations by mid-September. This is the workshop that you participated in, that board member Fran Spivey Weber participated in, was an element of that, but there's been constant meetings and communications to go through contingency plans and dealing with short, medium, and long-term solutions. The target date for release is mid-September. To the extent some of the recommendations may involve new projects that are significant, those will have to go through the permitting and contract approval, and some will be likely to be fairly substantial. Now let me get to the main report, our actions and the other state agencies' actions since the last report. The Energy Commission has permitted Carlsbad, which is located well in the San Diego region, for a 560 megawatt combined cycle power plant facility. Construction has not commenced, but the licensing has. We also permitted the Pio Pico, a simple cycle project near Otay Mesa, and we have applications for new power plant certification underway for Huntington Beach, Redondo Beach, repowers, and recently received one for El Segundo 4, and at the developer's request we suspended a Quail Brush facility, which would have been a 100 megawatt in San Diego. So that's common for power plant siting facilities. They get licensed to go through the process, and then many of them don't get built in the end. And that's something to be considered as you undergo your planning and rule revisions on once through cooling as well. The CPUC actions since our last report include authorization to Southern California Edison, the owner of the Songs plant, to procure 1,400 to 1,800 megawatts of new resources in the LA basins and 250 to 290 megawatts in Big Creek Ventura, and for San Diego Gas and Electric to procure 350 megawatts of new resources, including the repower of 45 megawatts at Escondido. That Escondido site, however, is a repower of a 35 megawatt facility, so it's really just a net 10 megawatt gain. The CPUC is conducting examinations of the Songs outage in new proceedings, looking at the costs of alternative power, and looking in their long-term planning process to look at the need for additional resources to replace Songs, and those are underway. CalISO actions since the 2012 report. They've conducted several preliminary local capacity requirement analyses, again keeping in mind the critical regional nature of replacing that resource. They refine their operating practices to minimize impacts. They've approved the transmission line upgrades that we've talked about, and they're looking at new projects that include potentially reactive support near Song Switchyard and the Talega or San Luis Rey substations, and a Sycamore Pinza-Quitos transmission line, again, to deal with that voltage support we talked about. This is a quick overview slide of where we are in the power plant status for once through cooling phase out. It's similar to the one I showed before, but it includes the additional information of facilities that have already been retired. You'll notice that San Onofre is called out, which is originally scheduled to be retired or upgraded in 2022 in red. What I'd like to add in information to this slide is that the San Onofre facility will continue to use a significant amount of water from the ocean to cool its spent fuel rods, perhaps as much as a conventional once-through cooling plant would. So it's not sitting idle. It actually needs to continue to use ocean resources in order to keep its spent fuel rods cool.
Right. The estimate I heard was approximately it'll be at 20% of what it has been.
Yeah, I'm looking at
So an 80%
more specific numbers, because I've heard 20%. I've also heard 30%, and so, but it's in that range. It's not trivial. Using 20 or 30% for San Onofre is a lot, because when they are running, the base is a really big number. So 20 and 30% of what their full power usage is still a big number.
And what's the time frame on that? Is it indefinite?
I can probably help you on that.
Go ahead.
I've been meeting with Edison on this issue. The cooling rods will need to be, the power rods will need to be cooled for a long period of time, but they're looking at doing it as an air-cooled system, and so they will be giving us a report at the end of this year on if they can get off of cooling water completely. They have other reasons besides our requirements. One is that without their power plant, they don't have enough heat to clean their intake pipe by running hot water back through and killing the stuff growing on it. So their intake pipe is starting to foul. And so they have some other reasons for wanting to get off of that intake water. So they're going to give us a report by the end of the year, and we'll have more information on that.
Yeah, the plant uses a fair amount of energy just in off mode to support its operations. They have motivation to get into dry cask storage containers while it cools off. But I want to mention they do have needs, and they'll have to figure out how to do that. The decommissioning process is a long process, and doing the careful planning to decommission the plant will take years and years.
That's
so
kind of
it's not
something
gonna-
you want to do, right? So
Pardon me?
you kind of want to do that, right?
Yeah, they want to do it right, and you won't. There won't be condos there tomorrow. It'll be a while before that site is changes significantly. So, the SAQUIS is we're focusing on the nearer term retirement dates, and that includes El Segundo, Encino, Contra Costa, Pittsburgh, Moss Landing, and Morro Bay. I'm going to go through those one by one. This is just kind of a close-up of the facilities that are affected near the Songs region. The report I'm going to give you includes the ones that are in Northern California as well, but to give you a little better idea of some of the critical ones that are in the neighborhood for Songs. Oops, I didn't want to do that. El Segundo. As you can see, its scheduled retirement date or conversion date is 2015. We've already had significant work done on that. 2 smaller units are retired. El Segundo 3 or 4 are 235 megawatt steam boilers. Number 3 retired July 10 after the second combined cycle of a repowering project came online. The interesting aspect of this facility is that they're originally, they've been gone back and forth a little bit on what they're going to do with unit number 4. And they're not seeking an extension, but they're filing an application with us to look at repowering Unit 4. And so it's a dynamic situation. We'll look at that right now, but at the moment they're not looking for an extension. Let me move on to Encina. 5 units. In the April 11 implementation plan, NRG, the plant's owners, proposed to replace Encina 1 through 3 with Carlsbad. And as I mentioned earlier in my report, we've licensed the construction of Carlsbad and to implement track 2 measures for 4 and 5. In March, NRC revised its compliance strategy for 4 and 5 and now says they will retire 4 and 5 on December of 2017. The observation is that Encina is in a pretty critical location to support San Diego area. So that's going to be something that the energy planners are going to need to look at in trying to provide the support that's needed in the area. So, so I guess the message on this one is stay tuned. It is one of the ones that and Carlsbad are the ones you're going to want to look at and follow the plans of whether they construct or not, or what the schedules are. Contra Costa, 6 and 7 are once through cooling. 6 and 7 were retired this year when Marsh Landing became operational, and Marsh Landing has replaced those. There are 4 190 megawatt air-cooled gas turbines. Pittsburgh's interesting. Pittsburgh has a schedule for retirement of their once through cooling facilities, and then there's a question about whether the plant is needed at all, but it's dependent on 4 transmission line upgrade projects. Transmission line upgrade projects are difficult, take some time, and so the issue there is to watch the progress on those to see if it affects the ability of that plant to retire as scheduled and anticipated. Things can happen with these, and they could be running late. Unit 7, parenthetically, is not a once-through cooling facility, but it can't run independent of the other 2 the way it's designed. So it's all or nothing. Moss Landing, we've talked about that. Moss Landing is a huge power plant. And units 6 and 7 are old steam boilers. 1 and 2 are very new combined cycle facilities, relatively speaking. We're, as a committee, is looking at Moss Landing to see if a revision is going to be needed on that. The specific plans haven't been announced on what they want to do in terms of complying with your reg. Morro Bay is the twin 338 steam boilers. The analysis indicates that, you know, its role in the power grid isn't vital, and the expectation on SAQUIS's part is that it would likely retire on or before its 2015 compliance date. And so we come to the specific conclusion and recommendations for you from the SAQUIS. At this current time, SAQUIS is not recommending a change in the compliance date. The SONG's retirement obviously increases the need for either existing once-through cooling units to operate longer perhaps, or for the new generation facilities or transmission facilities to be employed. We need further analysis to better understand the extent of reliance upon the existing once-through cooling facilities, and that analysis is underway now. And technical staff of the energy agencies need to undertake specialized studies that support any change to compliance state. The recommendations is that the Water Board should recognize that it may be necessary to modify final compliance dates for some generating units, especially those in Southern California. The Water Board should require generators to explain their intentions for the once-through cooling facilities, the status of any necessary permitting, contractual, and regulatory activities to repower, retrofit, or retire these generating facilities, and provide a detailed schedule, unit by unit, if they intend to either repower or retrofit. Facilities with near-term deadlines should file that data as soon as possible. Be very useful to get as much information right now as soon as possible, particularly in light of the song circumstance. The longer term, the ones with later deadlines aren't as critical as one with near-term deadlines. And with that, I conclude my report.
Thank you very much, Mr. Oglesby. I appreciate your thoughtful approach and an understanding that there really is a need for specific factual basis for any requests that you make, as opposed to a rush to judgment, which I think some people were anticipating. Some people probably really wanted, but I really appreciate that approach. And I also wanted to give Jonathan Bishop a chance to explain, just because there are people listening in and this is an issue of public importance, what our process is within the OTC rule in anticipating how to deal with a situation like this, just so people know what the process will be, the full public process, and what to expect.
Sure. So the development of the SACWIS was because we anticipated that there would be unanticipated issues related with the grid. And since they're all interconnected, there needed to be an ability for us to have the energy agencies looking forward as we converted these power plants from once-through cooling to new non-once-through cooling power plants. That repowering means they have to be offline for a certain amount of time. Because of all of that, we knew that there might be needs to change the schedule. We did this once with LADWP to address their needs to get off of coal and improve their transmission at the same time. So the SACWIS is looking as our essentially our experts on the grid to advise us if we need to make changes. If they determine that there's a change that's needed in the schedule and they make that recommendation, it would start an amendment to our policy. Now, it's amendment to the schedule on that policy, so it's not an overall change to the policy, but it's an adjustment to the schedule. We would have, the staff would take that recommendation, make a proposed amendment to the policy and bring it to the board for consideration. The board would then hear from all the public and the energy companies and the energy agencies to make a determination of that proposed schedule change is warranted, and then modify that that change.
A question for Jonathan. I just want to confirm that with LADWP's submission of materials in response to the 2011 request for information, that there will be no change in their compliance schedule.
So we had asked with the update to the amendment to the policy, we'd asked them to submit some additional information about their scheduling and their reliability. We've looked at that information as a staff, and we're not recommending any change in their schedule at this time.
I also wanted to just add an aside, particularly around demand response. There's been a tremendous amount of interest on behalf of the governor's office as well as water agencies as to what they can do, particularly those that are in the Songs area, but actually statewide now. And special thanks goes to Gita Kapai and Mandy Roman, who have translated some outreach materials that have been developed by a number of different agencies, both power agencies and water agencies, that will be going out in middle of this month for a request to the public and to businesses to save water and save energy, because saving water saves energy. And so it's very, very exciting, and I was very pleased that we were able to play a role in helping with that demand response activity.
So, Mr. Oglesby, thanks for the presentation. It was very useful for me, especially being new. The last slide, if you could pull that up on getting an update from the various facilities, and just wondering if Mr. Bishop could comment on that. Instead of waiting, perhaps you're already doing this anyway, but instead of waiting for the request to come in, to just get that information across the board from the various facilities.
Yes, we actually have a letter, and I can't tell you right off the top of my head if it's gone out yet or if it's in process, requesting updates from all the near-term facilities to make sure on an annual basis that we provide that information to the SACWIS to look at any changes in that. And so if it hasn't gone out, it will be going out shortly.
Good, thanks.
Yeah, well, just a kind of a technical clarification so I understand better. When on the second bullet under requiring generators to explain, we talk about the status of any necessary permitting, etc. When you talk about repowering or retrofitting, does that include the circumstance that you described where maybe rather than repowering units in a power plant, you might be working on the local transmission capacity? Because I'm hearing from you in your presentation that solves some of the capacity and reliability issues, but there's not necessarily a one-for-one trade-off. But so I don't.
Yeah,
where does transmission explanation fit into all?
Yeah, let me expand on that just a little bit. In that the intent for that is to ask them to identify the barriers that they may need to encounter, what the snags might be that would affect the schedule quite clearly, and it could be a wide range of things. And that's why it's worded any necessary permitting, contractual, and all that. So any problems they have, it could be something corporate. But be that as it may, on the transmission line, there's a limited availability of options to upgrade transmission. There's almost nothing more difficult than realigning or creating a new transmission path. So the first step in the energy agencies that are looking at this issues was to look at things that could be done relatively easy. Now the Sunrise Power Link was a big project that took a long time and was in place well ahead and had anticipated the continued operation of songs for some time. But the Barry Ellis improvements and the other ones that we're looking at are basically enhancements to the lines that are in place. One of the challenges in dealing with songs on transmission is that, and all of these coastal power plants, because one of the arguments you frequently hear is, well, now that we're not using coastal resources for cooling, they could be anywhere. And from a cooling standpoint, that has some merit, but the fact of the matter is all the infrastructure and transmission has been connected. So all the plumbing, if you will, all the electrical wires go to those spots, and the distribution system radiates out from those spots. And so it's a very careful analysis to figure out what can be done and what kind of flexibility is in the system. So if some of the options that the governor's task force is working on are going to require upgrades, new or alternative transmission, that's a big deal item. And so there are, and I guess the bottom line is there are fewer options than you might think to enhance, just enhance existing transmission. It ends up needing some new routes, and those very, very difficult to achieve, particularly running down the coast to San Diego. Very difficult.
If we didn't have such a packed agenda, I would actually ask you to do a short electricity 101, because as you know, all of our stakeholders have forums that they spend more time in than others, and there are some, including in this issue, that you see at the Water Board, but you also see at one of the energy agencies from time to time, but not very many. And I'm just wondering if you could send us even a link to some of your or somebody else's excellent material that kind of explains the physics of electricity, how transmission works, and this sort of as a backgrounder. We could post the link on our site so that people could be directed to sort of Energy 101, because in my experience over the years, people tend to specialize, and there aren't actually that many of us who have worked across the areas and have even a passing familiarity with the key issues in the other area. And I think it'd be nice to do a little cross-education, at least speaking for the water side, where we can help our stakeholders actually understand how electricity works and get a grounding in the challenges of some of these, the importance of base load, the importance of keeping the voltage a certain way, and why.
I think the agency that probably has something off the shelf, or is close to having something off the shelf, that's responsible for managing the grid is the CalISO.
Right.
And so I'll talk to my colleagues at CalISO and see what's going to be the most useful. We're the power plant licensing agency, but it seems to me, rather than talking about the technology of power plants, it's more how the circulatory system works.
Right. I'm just hoping there's some, sort of the 101 level. I've been through your website pretty heavily, and I did feel like I needed an extra degree.
Yeah, well,
to understand some of it, which is fine. And not a critique, but I'm looking for the 101. I think you're right that it should be CalISO, I hope.
very good.
Thank you so much for your time and the thoughtful presentation.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks, everybody.
Okay. Terrific. We do have a speaker, so don't leave. And I want to call back Sarah Aminzadeh to speak for the California Coastkeeper Alliance.
Hello again, board members.
Hello.
Sarah Aminzadeh with the California Coastkeeper Alliance. Just want to speak briefly to the point mentioned in the SWRCB report that the Water Board should recognize that it may be necessary to modify final compliance dates for generating units, particularly in Southern California. As you may know, California Coastkeeper Alliance and a wide variety of other groups worked closely with the State Water Board and staff for over 5 years to develop the once-through cooling policy and its compliance schedule. The compliance schedule was developed through extensive scientific research, agency coordination, and public outreach. And we are concerned about the potential for the closure of the San Onofre nuclear power plant to undermine the efforts that the State Water Board achieved to create an efficient and responsible schedule for phasing out once-through cooling in California. We understand the local reliability concerns raised by the SWRCB report, and I pronounce it SWRCB, but maybe it is
sounds
SWRCB.
better. I think we
I
should
think
we
SWRCB
should
is
do
better.
that. Yeah, I
Just-
think you're right.
Yeah.
We
so
can make an executive decision.
Yeah, I'll make an executive decision. So we do understand the local reliability concerns regarding the closure, but we caution the State Water Board in considering potential time extensions because of the potential need for generating capacity. We ask the State Water Board to continue working with the SWRCB agencies to achieve grid reliability without undue delays. And from our perspective, time extension should only be a final fallback once all the other options to to maintain grid reliability have been exhausted. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, we will have a full public process, and that message has been delivered, and I appreciate Mr. Oglesby's response to that. So we'll all be involved in this. Thank you. All right. Mr. Howard, next item.
Thank you. We are endeavoring to improve our ability to move forward quickly with 401 certifications of FERC projects, and in that regard, we've prepared an MOU with FERC to improve our coordination. David Rose from the Office of Chief Counsel, Aaron Ragazzi from the Division of Water Rights, and Tim Welch from FERC are here to present the item.
Good morning, Chair Marcus and members of the board. As Tom mentioned, I'm Aaron Ragazzi with the Division of Water Rights, and I'm going, before I get into the PowerPoint presentation, which should be coming up